Okay, well, we started looking at the inconceivable deposits of fossils and frozen animals, plants and animals. It's inconceivable that deposits of this sort could be really due to normal, slow, authenticous processes, meaning growing in place. Came from all over the world. Unusual transportation and rapid burial mechanisms are plainly indicated. The great numbers of fossils entombed in the rocks are stressed repeatedly by Newell, for example. He writes, Robert Broom, the South African paleontologist, estimated that there are 800,000 million skeletons of vertebrate animals in the Karoo Formation, just one formation, not worldwide. Harry S. Ladd of the U.S. Geological Survey, describing beds of herring fossils in the Miocene shales of California, says that more than a billion fish, averaging 6 to 8 inches in length, died on 4 square miles of the bay bottom. Ecology, Paleontology, and Stratigraphy is the title of the article. It's Science, Volume 129. The examples cited, let me underline this, the examples cited are merely random samplings of phenomena worldwide, which are found in great numbers of places, as I said, all around the world. They are not by any means the most spectacular or impressive examples, but merely typical illustrations of what is quite commonly encountered in the fossiliferous deposits of the world. One might, for example, discuss at length such marvels as the Brea Pits in California, Los Angeles, which have yielded tens of thousands of specimens of all kinds of living and extinct animals, each of which, by the unbelievable uniformitarian explanation, fell into this sticky graveyard by accident, one at a time. We have the Sicilian hippopotamus beds, the fossils of which are so extensive that they have actually been mined as a source of commercial charcoal. The great mammal beds of the Rockies, the dinosaur beds of the Black Hills and the Rockies, as well as in the Gobi Desert, the astounding fish beds of the Scottish Devonian strata, and on and on and on. These are in textbooks, but the explanation is bewilderingly ignorant of the fact that these things didn't take hundreds of millions of years, and then these fossil records and frozen specimens and so on are not of the same age. So how did they get all together? To attempt to account for these vast graveyards in terms of present-day processes and events, except by the most extreme and unscientific extrapolation, is absolutely impossible. And yet, it is in deposits such as these that most of the fossils are found, on which is based much of the generally accepted uniformitarian scheme of historical geology, which we can find even today in the textbooks Geology 101 and thereafter. Of course, we know that no geologist goes by these systems of aging to find out where they can find deposits of oil and coal. They have other indicators that don't agree with this nonsense. They just have their own particular indicators, which they later on learn as they take later courses. This is the third way listed. Here's the third way. Fossils which are the preservation of just the carbonization of coal. I have to put the word of here. This is the third way listed by Professor Miller, whereby fossil remains can be preserved, having reference to the formation especially of coal. Now, we make synthetic oil and coal in the laboratory in a matter of hours. So, formation especially of coal in which the hydrogen and oxygen largely disappear from the organic remains, leaving only the carbon, but often also leaving the original structure beautifully preserved. The coal deposits of the world are, of course, tremendous in magnitude, with the exact amount quite uncertain, but somewhere around 7 trillion tons. About all we really know about coal reserves is that there appears to be lots of coal in the world. Instead of 7 trillion tons, there may be double that. On the other hand, there may be less than half that. Nobody really knows because extensive research hasn't been done on this. Eugene Ayers and Charles A. Scarlett wrote this in their article on the wealth of the world's energy sources. Coal is the end product of the metamorphism of tremendous quantities of plant remains under the action of temperature, pressure, and evolutionists' claim of ages of time. But we've done this in the laboratory, so why not out in the real life? Coal has been found throughout the geologic column and in all parts of the world, even in Antarctica. Many coal fields contain great numbers of coal-bearing strata, interbedded with strata of other materials, each coal seam having a thickness which may vary from a few inches to several feet. And each foot of coal must represent many feet, just how many no one knows, of plant remains, so that the coal measures testify of the former existence of almost unimaginably massive accumulations of buried plants. Coal geologists have long been divided into two camps, those favoring the autochthonous, I don't know how to pronounce that, growth in place, means growth in place, theory of coal origin, and those favoring the allochthonous, transportation and deposition theory, which is consistent with the Noahic flood. Perhaps both, I don't know. Consistent uniformitarianism, of course, tends to favor the former and attempts to picture the coal-forming growth-in-place theory process in terms of modern peat deposits forming under swamplands, such as the Dismal Swamp of Virginia. The great thickness of the coal beds is accounted for on this theory by assuming that a continuous subsidence, the sinking of vegetation to the bottom of the land, more or less keeping up with the slow accumulation of plant remains. The interbedded strata of non-carbonaceous deposits of the inorganic material are again explained by assuming alternating marine transgression, periodic local flooding, and resulting periods of sediment deposition. This demands periodic, efficient, unimaginably efficient processes over great spans of time. But it has been well established that interbedding of this sort, with many undisturbed and uniform demarcation seams, cannot be attributed to sequential and long periods of time, which I just said, which would erode and break up those themes rather to one short period of time. So all that years, and all of a sudden one little local violent occasion would break it all up and you wouldn't have any coal at all. A wide variety of types of these intervening sediments have been noted in attempts made to explain them in terms of cyclothems, or recurring cycles of deposition of different kinds of materials corresponding to the different stages of marine transgression and regression. They map it out in the textbook, but when you add millions and hundreds of millions of years to this, it's just not going to happen that way. If the autochthonous growth in place theory of coal bed is correct, it is testimony to quite a marvelous sequence of circumstances. 1 or 2 or 3 coal seams formed by alternate stages of swamp growth, peat accumulation, marine transgression and emergence, and so on, might be believable, but the assertion that this cycle was repeated scores of times in the same spot over a period of perhaps millions and millions of years, that's not so easy to accept. This theory, which is purportedly uniformitarian in essence, is actually anything but that, as there is no modern parallel for any of its major features. The peat bog theory constitutes a very weak attempt to identify a modern parallel, but it will hardly suffice. There is no actual evidence that peat is now being transformed into coal anywhere in the world, and there never was. As a matter of fact, except for uniformist preconceptions, it would seem that the actual physical evidence of the coal beds strongly favors the theory that the plant accumulations had been washed into place. The coal seams are almost universally found in stratified deposits, and not exactly the same way everywhere all the time. The non-carbonaceous sediments intervening between the coal seams are always said to have been water-borne and deposited. So then how did the coal get there? The great thickness of some seams, and the great numbers of seams in a given locality also constitute prima facie evidence of rapid and cyclic currents carrying and depositing heavy burdens of organic material. Space precludes further discussion of the question of coal formations, although many more evidences could be marshaled in favor of the allochthonous transportation and deposition theory, such as the frequent splitting of coal seams into two or more independent seams, the many fossil trunks that have been found extending through two or more seams, the coal balls of matted and exceptionally well-preserved fossils, the great boulders often found in coal beds, the frequent grading of coal seams into stratified layers of shale, and other sedimentary rock, and so on. There's just so many reasons why it's not plausible. Regardless of the exact manner in which coal was formed, it is quite certain that there is nothing corresponding to it taking place in the world today. This is one of the most important of all types of geologic formations, and one on which much of our supposed geologic history has been based. Huge amount of material of living plants and animals, which then die, cover far more fossil evidences than elsewise. Nevertheless, the fundamental axiom of uniformity, that the present is the key to the past, completely fails to account for the phenomenon. Another amazing find was reported many years ago, that of a fossilized human skull in the coal measures. Where'd that come from? That's obviously in the wrong period of time. Didn't it know that? The outstanding authority on coal geology, Otto Stutzer, says concerning this mysterious fossil: in the coal collection in the Mining Academy in Freiburg, Stutzer was professor of geology and mineralogy in the School of Mines at Freiburg in Saxony. There is a puzzling human skull composed of brown coal and manganese and iron, and phosphatic limonite. Well, you have to learn all this stuff to be a geologist, but its source is not known. This skull was described by Karsten and Decken in 1842. Nobody's been able to explain it. Otto Stutzer, Geology of Coal, 1940. So, all these anomalies have been noted, but not explained, and certainly some of them are telling in terms of they completely contradict their theory of uniformitarianism. The coal was presumably tertiary in age, but at any rate is supposed to have far antedated the first appearance of man. The evidence again seems mostly to have been ignored, although it has been suggested that someone must have carved the skull. Wow. First year student or something? In any case, the coal was presumably tertiary in age, but at any rate supposed to have been far antedated the first appearance of man, and somebody said the skull was carved. Point 5. Fossils, which are the preservation of just the original form in casts or molds. This is another means of fossil preservation, whereby the original organic substance entombed in the sediments dissolves away, either leaving a cavity having the form of the original organism, or else being replaced by some sort of mineral water, which is then cast into the form of the original organism. Once again, this sort of preservation requires sudden or catastrophic burial, followed by rather rapid cementation of the surrounding sediments in order for the mold to be preserved. Otherwise, the surrounding rock is going to crush in on it, so it has to be done quickly. The remains of the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum, entombed by volcanic materials, offer an excellent illustration of this type of fossilization. The principle of uniformity again fails to provide modern examples of this type of process, except in terms of intense aqueous or volcanic action. Then we have what I've seen